But yeah, so
Yeah.
I don't have a good transition for this one, but at least not a direct transition. But Mr. Parker,
hmm
yeah, I'm putting together an action movie. Who do you think we should get for be the leading man?
the guy who played Saul Goodman in Breaking Bad.
Wow, you have the same weird thought process as the creators of Nobody.
Yeah.
So this was recommended to us by a friend of the show, D Rhino,
Yeah.
and it's currently available to stream on Amazon Prime. I ended up buying a Blu-ray because it was cheaper than me buying a month of Prime, and I don't. I enjoy not having Prime actually.
Mm, yeah.
Outside of occasionally having to go through other means to watch TV shows we're reviewing.
Right. Yeah. 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 To each their own. Yeah.
Yep. But anyway, so I hadn't heard of this movie before. Apparently, it came out in theaters during COVID.
Yeah. I remember vaguely seeing like people talking about it online. And they had the same, let's just say some people had the same worries about this movie that they did about Joker. And all I can
Mm.
say is
Oh, you
the,
mean like the oh, it's going to encourage radicalism,
yes, yeah. But I can tell you that's not the case with either movie. So
right? They could not manifest a violent incident at a movie theater to happen,
right,
no
yeah,
matter how much they wanted it to.
yeah. But yeah, so we watched Nobody, which the title is it kind of has a double meaning, or not kind of, it does have a double meaning.
Right. I think this is going to be a high spoiler review because it is hard to talk about the movie. Like I can generically say that it's a competent action movie and it's not a bad time.
Right, yeah, I agree with that.
There, that is our non-spoiler review.
Yeah,
Uh, we let the spoilers begin. Okay,
yes, yeah,
so Mr. Odenkirk is playing who seems to be an ordinary family man living a humdrum life.
yes, yeah. He works at like a manufacturing plant for his father-in-law. Takes the bus to work, and he basically has the same morning routine every single day, and just nothing really big happening with him. Of course, he's got a wife, he's got two kids. Son looks like he's about what 15, 16, somewhere around there.
That'd be my guess. And like, yeah, he has no use for his dad because he thinks his dad is a weakling.
Right, and yeah.
But his daughter really loves her father and thinks the world of him.
Yeah. Um,
The wife, if the wife is not having an affair, she is thinking about it. I think from the
yeah.
way that she behaves.
Yes. Yeah. The wife's a real estate agent. And but then one night, things go wrong because a couple break into their house, um, and they're obviously looking for money, but they don't really have a whole lot of cash on them. They steal his watch, and then he's just about to. He's got a driver, a golf club in his hand. He's about to bash the woman's head in, but then he stops, and then
Right.
I remember watching.
After his son has tackled one of them to the ground and is wrestling with him, and
Right,
she has
yeah,
pulled a gun on him.
yeah, and he's about to bash her head in with the golf club, but then he stops for some reason. And I remember watching and thinking, "What the hell is wrong with you?"
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah,
Like all I could think at the time was, okay, so what he thinks that this is just going to escalate the situation? Is he worried that if he hurts one of them, that they'll definitely hurt his son?
yeah. But then, yeah, he stops himself, and then he tells his son to let the guy go, and then the two robbers leave, and
Yeah, and at this point, you think that the movie is going to be about a kind of a weak man finding his strength. And
Right.
it's sort
Yeah.
of like that, but I was kind of more expecting it to be a weak man who had never really had strength, finding his strength.
No, yeah, it's you actually come to find out that it was a strong man who became weak and then has to become strong again.
Right. And what's funny about it is that the whole thing could have been avoided if he had just looked under the couch and noticed that his daughter's favorite kitty bracelet was not, in fact, stolen.
Right. Yeah. Because that's yeah. At first, he doesn't really. He was trying to let it go, but then yeah. Then when his daughter's like, "Oh, my kitty cat bracelet's stolen, it is gone," and he thinks they stole it, and
Yeah,
so
that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, you can disrespect me, but my little angel.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh, the other part of it too is that he visits his father, who's living in a nursing home, and his father's played by Christopher Lloyd.
Hmm.
And you find out that his dad used to be an FBI agent, so he gets his dad's old FBI badge and his
And a
gun, and
gun. Yeah.
yeah, so he goes around town because he saw a tattoo on one of their wrists, so he's going around all the tattoo parlors to say, "Hey, have you seen this tattoo?" And yeah, and then he goes into the one real scuzzy tattoo place where he looks like he's about to get beaten up, and the one of the guys, the old guy who's there, is a Vietnam vet, sees a tattoo on his wrist, and looks like, thank you for your service, and then goes into a panic room.
Yeah, proceeds to lock himself in a panic room, which makes the other guys back down.
Yeah. Um,
So our Mr. Nobody proceeds to track down where these two people are,
mhm.
and he is about to, well, it's from the writer of John Wick. He's about to John Wick them,
Yeah.
um, when he realizes that they have a kid, and so he again backs down.
Right.
Now, at this point, you're kind of thinking to yourself, okay, there's something weird about this guy, because like I could, I'm gonna pull out a name out of my head, name out of the air. I could see a Steve Carell character in a movie borrowing his tough dad's FBI gun and badge, flashing it around, and then getting his stuff pushed in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's the start of his training arc. So that was kind of what I was expecting to happen. But the way that he made those guys back down, and the fact that he had been in the military at some point, made me go, okay, there's some sort of secret story going on here.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing we forgot to mention is he has I guess he was like a foster brother that he talks to,
Oh, right.
who's I guess he's presumed dead, and the only way they talk to each other is through this old CB radio.
Right. And the interesting thing, they always, whenever they're speaking, it's always like being routed through his home speaker system. So you have the dials moving along.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, and that brings up a kind of a technical point that I thought was interesting. Or I should say, this movie is just very slickly directed.
Mhm.
Like when they're early on in the movie, when they're showing every day of his being the same, they do like very quick smash cuts to the repeating events.
Yeah.
Like when he gets robbed, he's just right back into the routine, but clearly something is off.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and then so then so after he leaves the couple, he goes and punches a brick wall with his bare hands.
Yeah, I was thinking, okay, edgy boy.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's gonna. I might feel nice in the moment, but
that's gonna hurt.
yeah,
Yeah.
I, assuming your hands aren't just completely broken.
Yeah.
But thankfully they aren't, because he rides the bus home, feeling defeated, because while he got his watch back, he did not in fact get the kitty cat watch back.
Yeah.
And in one of the, it would be fair to call this scene a little bit contrived.
A little. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yes. Yeah. So what happens is they're on the bus, and this Humvee crashes into a barricade that's right next to the bus, right next to it, and it's a bunch of these like drunk Russian mob guys get out,
mhm.
and they're like, "Hey, I want to," they want to get on the bus, and of course the bus driver is intimidated, so she lets them on, and there are other people on the bus with them, including a young woman, and
Yeah.
you seeing how they're acting and everything, and he's just, and that's when uh Odenkirk's just like, okay, I'm gonna do something about these guys.
Yeah. And the impression I kind of got was it was kind of death wishy, where it's like, oh, a chance to unleash all this anger and violent urges I had earlier. Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, so he just proceeds to have this prolonged fight on this bus with all these Russian mob guys, and of course, you could kind of tell as the fight starts that he's rusty. He hadn't done it in
Mm.
a while, so it's yeah, he's not quite with it. But then he finally gets into a rhythm, or gets uh, finally figures out what to do, and then just beats them senselessly. And
Yeah.
yeah, and one of them, he crushes their throat, and gives them a quick emergency tracheotomy. And but yeah, so then he goes home, and this is okay. This is the part of the movie that I kind of was like a little confused by, because he comes home and his wife is still up, and she's like, where have you been? And she sees him, he's just got all these injuries and his shirt's covered in blood, and he's like, yeah, it was one of those nights.
Right. And she's very understanding about it. It's like, what?
Yeah. So so she clearly knows about what he used to do. And so then we cut to this Russian mob boss, and who's, f- uh, as crazy as Odenkirk's character is, this guy's even crazier.
Yeah, I would say that I kind of thought they were trying a little too hard to play up the crazy thing.
Yeah,
Like he's kind of quirky. Oh, he's quirky because he owns this club and he goes up and does karaoke at his club.
yeah,
And oh, one of the Russian. So he basically runs a cash bank for the Russian mob.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, one of the holders of they had some special name for it that I don't recall.
Yeah,
But
it's basically like the Russian mob's 401k is what it
yes,
was. Yeah.
uh, and so it's we're worried about having a guy who goes up on stage and do it, and then he just random. I don't even think he kills the person who objected. I
No, he goes and kills another guy, and then yeah,
Right, just
and
to prove the point in kind of a violent in a like overly violent. Well, not over. Okay, when I say overly violent, I mean like disproportionately violent way. A very
yes,
unpleasant death for
yeah,
nothing. And the Russian mobsters are just like, oh, okay, yeah, you've proven that you're tough. Well,
eh,
the guy had a 3% share in the bank, so his shares devolved to us, so we're okay with this.
yeah, yeah, and then the guy finds out that, of course, one of the guys that Odenkirk beat up was actually the guy whose throat he crushed. Was the Russian mob guy's little brother.
Yeah,
And yeah, so he goes to see him on the hospital. And I will say, like, is obviously, with the being the from the writer of John Wick, if you've seen like especially like the first John Wick, has a lot of dark humor in it. This movie has a lot of dark humor in it. Um, so like the Russian mob guy, he's in the hospital. And he grabs one of the chairs from the waiting room, and he goes into the guy's room, and he flings the chair at the guy right in the head.
yeah, like and just beating him with the chair as he's interrogating. Like, what happened? How many people did this? What do you mean it was just one guy?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and so then they one of the guys managed to get Odenkirk's bus pass. So then they try to figure out. So that's when they try to figure out who this guy is. And I did like how they hired this woman who's like a computer hacker
Yeah,
to find out who he is. And then once she finds out, she like prints all the pictures off and throws it at the mob guy. And she's got her suitcase. She's like, "Okay, I'm out of here."
you don't have to worry about paying me. Bye.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, so what we find out is that Bob's character was he was nobody,
Mhm.
um, which basically meant that he was he had called himself an auditor for the military earlier, and that's true in a sense, in the sense that He would basically go around sniffing out corruption and put an end to it rather violently.
Yes.
Actually, rather reminded me of the premise of The Beekeeper,
Mm, okay.
since that was the same idea of, oh, it's the bees that take out the rogue bees that are endangering the hive.
Mm. Yeah. And he does so with he did so with ruthless efficiency. Um, and so then the rest of the movie is basically just is basically Bob like trying to fight for his life against these Russian mob guys, which includes a scene again reminiscent of John Wick when they all go into his house and he has to fight them off. And
Yeah. Oh, there's one detail though.
mm,
So you might ask, okay, how did a guy like that become, to use popular internet vernacular, a blue-pilled simp?
yeah,
Uh, he basically let one guy go, and thinking, okay, he's just going to go back to his nefarious ways.
mhm,
And no, he just married somebody, had a kid on the way, and was living a happy life. And Bob said, I want that for me.
yeah,
And so that's when he stopped being nobody
right,
and became nobody. It's
yeah,
it's clever, you see.
yeah, yes, yes. um,
Um,
yeah,
but yeah, he has to fight the Russian mob in his house after he puts his family in the safe room downstairs. When in the course of setting up his defenses, that's when he finds the kitty necklace that was just sitting under the couch the whole time. And that's another example of the humor of this movie, where
yeah,
oh, if you just looked under the couch, whole movie would have been unnecessary.
right, yeah. um, but yeah, and then so then he gets well, he gets kidnapped at first, but then he gets himself out of it, because he gets put in the trunk of the car. And little known, probably a little known fact that some people don't know is if you ever, hopefully this never happens to you, but if you do find yourself getting put in the trunk of a car, you can open the trunk up. There's like a latch in there to for just that reason. So, and that's what
Yep.
he does, and he opens it up, and of course he can't jump out of the back because they're moving too fast. But then he gets a fire extinguisher, and yeah,
Right, distracts them, gets them to crash.
yeah,
There's a character we didn't mention who is this black Russian guy who seemed like he was going to be a bigger deal, but he just dies in the middle of the movie.
yeah.
Kind of a shame, because I was kind of looking forward to more of him, because he was like the one minion of the Russian mob who actually had like a name and a thing going on. But
Yeah. Yeah, he had an interesting backstory where his father was an Olympic athlete in
yeah, from Ethiopia.
Ethiopia, yeah, and he left him and his mom, and they were in Russia, I guess, and so yeah.
Right, he got to grow up during Glasnost, and then the collapse of the Soviet Union. So eh, rough times for him.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, and then basically uh then
Well, so then Bob goes and proceeds to kill a bunch of people and burn down the entire bank,
yes.
including all the money.
Yeah, and then he shows up at the nightclub where the Russian mob guy's doing karaoke, and he's just sitting there eating a steak, like, "Hey, how's it going?"
Yeah, some nice casual moments there. And this all, once the Russian mobster freaks out, and once he finds out that he has had all of his money destroyed, and weirdly enough, Bob offers him like, hey, where did he get the idea he wanted to quit? Did he say it himself, or did one of his people say it?
It's probably one of his people, I think.
Yeah, because they really
Yeah.
hadn't interacted before. But hey,
Oh no,
just
it was Colin Salmon's character, the in the barber shop.
oh, right, okay,
Yeah, he got a bunch of info from him, and he told him, like, yeah, he's in charge of this, basically this nest egg for the Russian mob, but he doesn't want to do it anymore.
right.
Yeah.
I hear you don't want to do it anymore. Just go retire somewhere quietly. But the Russian mobster, being kind of a crazy villain, proceeds to launch an attack on him at the factory where we left out the. Yeah, well, we could talk about it later.
Yeah.
But he had bought the factory from his father-in-law just specifically so they could have a big gunfight in the middle of it without anybody being around.
Right. Yeah.
And Bob proceeds to save the day, along
Yes.
with help from his father and an unexpected assist from his foster brother.
Right. Yeah. And a very, very well choreographed and slightly over the top action sequence, but that didn't bother me because it's
From the writer of John Wick.
right. Yeah.
Yep. So Daniel, I tend to talk too much in these in these reviews. What was your overall impression of it?
I enjoyed it. Yeah. I kind of felt the same way I did with Death Wish, where the beginning of the movie, it's like you're angry with it, but then you're angry with what's going on. But then as the movie progresses, you start to get into it more, and you figure out what it is that the filmmakers are going for, and I
Hmm.
would also say the same thing with John Wick, where it was just like, yeah, you're sad that whatever it is that happens, but then once the main character decides, all right, I'm gonna go get some revenge, it turns out turns out for the best. Yeah.
Uh, I'll say for me, Bob Odenkirk being the action star, the gritty action star, was a little bit of a hard pill for me to swallow.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad, but I mostly know him as a comedic actor from things like Mr. Show or whatnot.
Yeah.
So I had a little bit of a hard time taking him seriously in the role. He was definitely trying, definitely
Yeah.
going for it. He never did anything that actively broke it. It's just entirely me typecasting him. So
Yeah.
um,
Well, in a way, he was kind of perfectly cast because you see that guy; he's very unassuming. So you don't
right,
you don't expect him to be this cold, calculated, cold blooded killer. Yeah.
right. I would say that for my personal tastes, I think I would have probably preferred if they had been ripping off Death Wish a little bit more, where he was just an ordinary guy who manned up rather than being a secret badass the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's just a personal preference thing. I will say that I am squeamish enough that some of the violence was a little bit over the top for me.
Yeah. Um, yeah. There's some exploding bodies in there. Yeah.
Let's the exploding bodies. So I'm kind of big on proportionality, and I didn't necessarily feel like some of the early scenes, the violence was proportionate to what had been done.
Mm,
Like Bob was escalating it a lot of the time,
yeah.
which makes sense for his character since he was the auditor,
Hmm.
the big time problem solver. But like it was a little bit odd that well he even said himself, I probably overcorrected trying to become so unassuming because earlier on in the movie he was being pushed around by his brother-in-law and you
Yeah.
know, he was implying he couldn't take care of his sister. So
Yeah.
they did a Chekhov's gun thing where he put the brother-in-law tried to give him a gun and he put the gun in the fridge, and then of course that gun got used later on during the big action scene at the plant.
Right. Yeah. So it was almost literally a Chekhov's gun. Yeah.
If it wasn't on the man, but it was just about everything else you could want.
Yeah.
Um, I enjoyed John Lithgow's scene, not John Lithgow,
Christopher
Christopher
Lloyd.
Lloyd's scene. I always get them mixed up when I'm talking about them for some reason. But I enjoy Christopher Lloyd's scenes where the assassins come for him and he just deals with them.
Yeah.
And the orderly comes in and is like, "Don't make so much noise." Because there was a shotgun blast and he was watching a western. Like, you need to turn that down. You're disturbing people or something like that.
He's like, okay.
Yeah, so I'd say that just for me personally, I probably liked the idea of this movie better than actually watching it.
Hmm.
But it's not like it's kind of like where I'll occasionally watch something outside of my personal genre preferences. Um, like I can't call it bad; it just wasn't entirely for me.
Yeah. 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 Understandable. Yeah. Um.
Right, I would say my biggest stumbling points were even more so than it being Bob Odenkirk as the kick-ass action lead. Which, I could see some people having some trouble with Keanu Reeves as the badass action lead
Mm,
if they had just thought of him as being from Bill and Ted. So
yeah,
that's
yeah,
actors. Actors have gotten over that before.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it was just like it was all very well done violence. I think I would have also preferred a bit more nuance from the villain,
Mhm.
but I
Yeah,
also,
he was pretty one track minded. Yeah,
yeah. But on the flip side, I noticed it was like a tight 90-minute movie, so you didn't necessarily have time for nuance. So
right. Yeah,
yeah, for just a short action movie, I would say that I liked the Beekeeper better, but I can appreciate what they were doing here.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, I kind of had, I like you. I kind of wish there was some. I wish that some of the characters were fleshed out a bit more, and maybe could have gotten a little more time with them, and gotten an explanation as to, like, with his wife, like, okay, well, did his wife know that he was an auditor? And
Right. When they were dating, would he just occasionally show up beaten up, and she was just blasé about it by this point, even though it had been years?
yeah, yeah, kind of like in Spy Family when Yor shows up and she's covered in blood, and her brother Yuri's just like, oh, hey, sis, hey, Yor.
Right. Like when you're operating on Spy Family logic in a live action show, you have issues.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but no, I can't call it bad.
No, I can't either. Yeah,
But no, it sounds like you enjoyed it more than I did. So
yeah.
glad you did.
Yeah.